Now tell me your deepest, darkest secret.
Yeah, exactly. Save it for my many therapists.
All right, we're live, Joshua. Get
All
us
right.
rolling on the Always Cheating Pod.
Excellent. Yeah. Hail cheaters. Welcome to the Always Cheating Podcast. My name is Josh Landon, here with Brandon Kelly from the Canadian border, over the Canadian border.
Yeah,
Brandon, how are you?
I'm good. We're seeing previews now for this upcoming movie starring our beloved Jesse Plemons called Civil War. And I wonder if you and I will have to face off brother versus brother at the Canadian border to really, you know, bring Western civilization to its
Yeah.
knees.
What was
Is
that?
gonna come to that?
What, what was that MMA movie where the two guys fought against each
Warrior.
other? Yeah,
Yeah.
Warrior. I'm thinking kind of warrior-ish,
We
So that's
yeah.
yeah.
I hope that we embody the warrior spirit on
Hmm.
every episode of Always
Yeah,
Cheating.
that feels like it was almost the opposite of that. But thank you to everyone for sticking us. Just there's a total. I'm just totally pivoting out of this, Brandon.
Do it.
But thanks everyone for listening this week, and thank you for everyone who put up with us not doing a pod last week. We just ran into some technical. Well, there's just a lot going on, wasn't there? You forgot your laptop, and in Canada, my wife had COVID. It was there was a double game week, so doing it a day later didn't make any sense. And so
Yeah.
we actually, I'm not sure in all the years we've done the pod though that we, like, you and I are like insanely consistent with them, and so to miss even one felt like
Yeah.
like we'd sort of ruined some kind of project or whatever. I remember there was some congressman in Michigan a few years ago who had he had voted in every single
Uh-huh.
bill that you could vote for or something like that, and he finally, I think Justin Amash was his name, and he finally for some reason or another couldn't be couldn't be available for a vote or whatever, and he like sort of broke down, and it was like it was an irrelevant vote, but it was like his identity was
Yeah.
tied up, and
Cal
he
Ripken
was
style.
exactly. So our Ripken-esque streak is over, but we're reborn like a
Yes.
phoenix
A
from
new
the
Wordle
ashes.
streak begins today.
Exactly. So, but thanks everyone for joining us on YouTube as well. This is, of course, we are still a podcast, but we have decided to start recording these on the tube. Brandon,
We're tubing.
why
Not like
YT?
Jeffrey, but like the U.
I see YT as an acronym, but
Yeah.
do like people, does like what is there's Gen Z and then there's one even below Gen Alpha. I wonder if does Gen Alpha, do they actually say the word YouTube, or do they just go straight to? They probably have some acronym that you and I haven't even like heard before,
Oh,
right?
they're
Like
totally
my
tubing. They're
yeah,
tubing.
my 7-year-old is a full on Gen Alpha.
Mm.
So anyway, game week 20.
Jenna
We're here to talk
Elfman?
about Jenna Elfman. My 7-year-old is Jenna Elfman. It's crazy. No one can explain it. Darman Greg star Jenna Elfman. So we are here to talk FPL. Game week 26 is, I guess we would call it 7/8 in the books. We had what ended up being a nice full schedule on Saturday. I like I'm fine with them never having an early match, because that usually it's hard for me to wake up for that anyway, and I can actually get up and make some decisions before the deadline. I actually think next
Yeah.
week we have the same thing. There's no early match, and so but we had the sort of spread out across the day. And
Yeah.
as an American, the late afternoon fixture on Saturday is fantastic. It's just on a time like 3 o'clock on a Saturday where I typically have anything going on. Right. It's like,
Yeah.
it's maybe like a go to the gym kind of time or whatever. And so that's what I did. I went to the gym and I watched the first half of the Arsenal match, came back, watched the second. I don't know about you. I was sort of tracking my overall rank a little bit on FPL game week as we were heading down there. And when they conceded, it's like I couldn't quite do the math fast enough to decide whether that helped me or hurt me.
Yeah.
And
there were
I
a
think
few with the
yeah.
double defense, right? The
Mhm.
people who jumped on Raya goalkeeper when Saliba
Yep.
and Gabriel, those people got hurt the worst by that clean sheet concession.
Yeah, and I think ultimately I did jump up like 3,000 spots. So it did
We'll
help
take
me a
anything at
little
this
bit.
point, Josh.
Yeah, exactly. So, but a fun Saturday of matches. I thought the today's match was a little bit of a dud, especially for any of us who went for Huang. A fine decision. I think it was. We sort of had an opportunity to go for a similarly priced player who plays in game week 29. in Douglas Luiz. And for anybody who went that way, obviously it worked. And you were pretty aggressively anti-Douglas Luiz on our Patreon pod. Are
Was
you
I?
still? Yeah, you were like, I don't see it, I don't get it. Are you still?
Well, I mean, I
you
don't
know,
know how you could be.
let's rewind the tape. Let's listen. Let's listen back. I wish I had it handy here.
There's nothing. There's no better way to silence the critics than a brace, and to really rub it in. Douglas Luiz is scoring a header, like in the 6-yard box, no less. So that really does say, "Hey, fantasy managers, I'm here. Take me. I'm yours."
Yeah, I mean,
But
and the goal where he crashes into the box. I mean, I think it's the question was really. I'm actually going to pull up. I'm going to pull up something here because there's a question from Scully, and he said, I don't know if that's if he's the Scully
from
from
He-Man,
X Files or not. From what?
I'm thinking of Commander Grayskull. Who's that guy?
Oh yeah,
Skeletor.
I was thinking of a slightly but not much more modern reference of Mulder and Scully
Okay,
from
could
X
be
Files.
either. We don't know.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
internet,
I'm
you could
surprised
be
that hasn't
anonymous.
been rebooted. Isn't X Files like prime for a reboot? Like it feels like I don't know.
Totally.
Anyway,
Yeah. We need like a USA Network Suits style or Burn Notice style X Files.
they're even finding UFOs now. Like if anything, like X Files feels
It's
like
passe.
more
Yeah.
relevant than yeah. So,
Deep, call it
but
Deep State.
yeah, but yeah, exactly. An X file, it'd be like an X Files series. Like sometimes when they like take something and
Sure.
they like the subtitle is like whatever. Anyway, so Scully says, can you think of any players that have had seasons like Douglas Luiz is having this year, where everyone's convinced he's not a great FPL asset, his point scoring will eventually dry up, yet he just carries on smashing it. No, I wouldn't say that. I actually had him for about 8 weeks this season, and he was terrific. I think I dropped in because of I don't know, run of fixtures or something like that.
Yeah.
Oh, I think it was he was on like 9 yellows or 4 yet. What? Yeah, it must have been 9, right? Because 9 would have been regardless. He was on a yellow card suspension risk, and then I think he did get suspended, and he wasn't. I didn't have any like value built up in him, and so I dropped him. And but I did think about bringing him back this week, and now I don't think it's healthy or fun to play the FPL hindsight game too aggressively. Like I think but I do think that there is a question about whether we all just got like a little over our skis about there wasn't like a great. It was just one fixture, really, right? It's not like there's like a great long-term rationale for having a Wolves player.
Yeah.
And I mean, they were pretty dominant in the match, but it was also like they're also Wolves, right? And it's like they're not like it wasn't like they weren't Man City at home to Sheffield or Liverpool or something.
It was one of
right?
the.
It's like,
It was easily one of the worst matches I've watched this season, and
it was pretty low quality.
maybe you raise your level to the level of your opposition, and that's the defensive Wolves. But Sheffield United were awful, and
Yep.
Wolves did not play well at all. And I don't think anybody expected that. And I think I don't quite know how to explain it other than what makes Wolves good is sometimes reacting to the better opposition and playing to their strengths against somebody like Spurs, who they've done the double on.
Totally.
They can just exploit all those weaknesses.
That's true.
And then when
And
they come up against a team that's so bad like Sheffield United, there's nothing to exploit.
I think in general we have to be careful evaluating anybody the week after they play Spurs, right? Spurs makes every team they play look like a attacking dynamo, right? And so but yeah, I actually agree with you about this match. I don't know why I'm like reluctant to confess this, like as if you and I watch 20 hours of Premier League every single weekend, but I turned it off. I got about 40 minutes into the match and I was just like, this sucks.
Yeah.
I was just like really not enjoying myself. It was not a fun game. I got about 30 minutes in and I was like, Hoying's not going to score. Like it was the whole setup was just, I didn't feel like
he didn't come close.
He didn't really come close. He had like he might have, I guess he had an opportunity for an assist, maybe like kind of, I don't know, but it was like, there wasn't a lot going on. And sometimes you just get you get that feel early on in a match. You're like, this isn't going to work. This is not going to pan out. And I don't want to be part of this. If anything, I thought Sheffield was kind of better in the first, like at the very least they had an effective counterattacking strategy. They just have, honestly, they just have no talent. And it's like, it's a crazy thing. It's crazy to watch a team with this little, like the Premier League has so much money, right? And there's like all of these quite good teams in the championship, like
Yeah.
right now, like Leicester in the championship is so much better than, like, you could just literally swap them and Leicester probably stay up, right? It's like,
Right.
it's just, I don't really know how they got whatever. And I don't mean that to, like, I guess it's like a really mean thing to say. And I don't mean it that way, because congrats to them for going up. Like, there's no, they earned it, and that's fine. But like, it's just, it feels so extreme right now, right? Like, I can't
Yeah.
remember ever seeing a team that just felt like they couldn't hang at all in the Premier League, right?
Yeah.
Maybe Huddersfield United's second season in the Premier League, there was kind of that stench of like, okay, like, we need to get these guys out
But
of here.
let's come back to Douglas Luiz, because I think this is what fantasy managers are thinking about now. Is like, where did it all go wrong? I bought a Wolves player, whether it was Neto or Wang. Sarabia was obviously the guy to get in hindsight.
Sure.
And he's got
it always it's always the third option.
Yeah.
Turns out to
but
be
he has, Sarabia has what Douglas Luiz has, and that's penalties. And I think what's interesting about the hindsight here with Douglas Luiz is Huang plays the number 9, and you've got to sort of like, if you go by the rule book of being a fantasy manager, can you take the player that's farthest forward? And Huang had that going for him. And Douglas Luiz, I think the hard thing for fantasy managers this season is you've got a number 6 in Luiz where you don't know what the heat map is necessarily going to look like match to match. He has strung it all together. What players am I reminded of? I'm reminded of Yaya Toure, who you've sort of like caveated in comparing to Douglas Luiz this season. And also just like somebody like Aaron Ramsey, when Aaron Ramsey had it was that same Yaya Toure season where you just think, have I missed the points? Am I not progressive enough? Should I just get somebody else? Because there's going to be Douglas Luiz is one of those players where you think, well, if he's doing it, should there be another Douglas Luiz on another team? And maybe I should get him and get ahead of that curve.
I think what makes him a little unique is the set piece stuff, which wasn't even really a factor in this particular match. But like, like when you look at the one that came to mind about from Scully's question about like randos who kind of explode was Etienne Capoue. And he had a season with Watford. This is like 8 or 9 years ago now. Maybe, I don't know if it was that long. But it was like he scored. It was like the first 4 matches of the season, he scored in literally every single one of them. And everyone was like,
Timmy Gomez style.
Yeah, exactly. And you're like, this can't last, right? And it's like this is not his game. Like, I think he'd already been in the Premier League for a season or 2 by then too.
He was at Spurs for a while, I believe.
Yeah, I think he went there after, but I can't remember. Yeah, but but it was like it wasn't sustainable, and yet he was 4.5 million and kept scoring. And so Luiz is a little more expensive, but he's scoring, and he's on. He takes corners, or I think he takes corners on one side of the pitch, right? And he's on like virtually all set pieces, right? Like he's on like these kind of close range Trent level set pieces, but he also is on the like send the ball in to a to like a like a the kind of like in swing whatever, the big ones, right? And so like the ones that are going 30,
the bombers.
I'm describing this so in such detail. Yeah, exactly. But basically there's just like a lot of routes to points for him. So I and again, I'm not like, oh my god, we made this giant mistake, but I think there was a kind of momentum that took over. And I think Keith Hopkins had a question for us. Said, how much better or worse do you think the season would be if you didn't look at or follow the Twitter community suggestions, but instead base your choices on your own instincts and research? Now, this is one that always crops up when there was a community pick that doesn't bang, right? And when one does, you just assume it was your own instincts and research, right?
I could have had a better idea.
Yeah, exactly. It's always so. I don't mean to like call Keith out here because we all are guilty of this, but like but I do think. I think in general, I was kind of kicking myself this weekend, and I think the reason I was kicking myself was I don't feel like I did do enough thinking about this. And I think what threw me off a little bit, and maybe you were in the same position, was
I'll say it. I was not in the same position.
Okay. Well, my thinking was basically how much weight should I put on game week 29 when I make my transfer this week? Like, do I really want to just fully commit myself to free hitting in game week 29, right? There's going to be very few teams that play in 29. Villa are one of the ones that we know play. Um, so there's kind of like another, this is basically what you and I talked a little bit on our Patreon pod.
Mhm.
In the end, though, I just couldn't get past how tempting it was to have a Wolves player for that Sheffield United fixture. And so I don't know, like I don't know how helpful it is to just do like a lot of hindsight analysis like this, but I do wonder if I maybe just didn't like think it through. It was just these blank game weeks, I think, are always really tricky, right? Because you have fewer options. Because of that, you sort of see everybody moving in one direction too, right? Like add Spurs to the equation for this week, add Chelsea to the equation for this week. I don't think any of us are really looking at Huang that. I mean, maybe we still are to a degree, right? But if I have Palmer, I'm just starting him this weekend, right? I'm not looking for another midfielder to start.
Mhm.
So I don't know. Like, did you feel pretty like calm and rational, and like how'd you feel when Huang failed to bang today? Were you fine with that?
Well, I would have preferred that he got points, definitely.
Mhm.
My
He got
if
three. He got a clean sheet bonus point, Brandon.
So, when the pre-match, there was this whole saga of Huang going down injured in the warm-up, and like, oh God, is he not even going to start? I went
Yep.
into full panic attack mode because the first player on my bench, the only live player on my bench, is Sven Botman, who has a -2. So you better believe I'm happy with a
Yeah.
three-pointer from Huang. That's a
Yeah.
big
Yeah.
turnaround from getting a -2. Um, I I was not happy watching the entire Wolves performance. And, usually you can say, oh, I made the right decision because I saw Huang get these certain chances. And that was what justified my thinking. Did I think in hindsight that I would have made a different decision? Ultimately, I was guided by this feeling that I was going to get Salah back in the next 2 game weeks. So what I really wanted was a cheaper player. And I honestly didn't think too much of like who from which team, because
Okay.
I'm not going to think too hard about whether it's the Wolves. I mean, maybe Villa is a top 4 team right now. So why wouldn't you get a Villa player instead of a Wolves
Yeah.
player? But I
I
just
think that
think,
was
yeah,
yeah, that was part of the equation that made me kick myself a little bit. Was just like, yeah, you can get like a top 5 or 6 player for super cheap who also plays in 29, or you can get a kind of Wolves player where there's like 3 options that are all
yeah,
kind of equally good. Neto kind of bugs me, and I can't tell if it's just because I'm like looking at him from the perspective of a Huang owner, but it's like he's obviously very good, but there's just something about him like hero balling it all the time, or it feels like Neto was like kind of doing. He's a little bit like who is
Anthony
the
Knockhart,
no the Paraguayan player from Newcastle,
Elmiron,
Elmiron, where
yeah,
sometimes Elmiron feels like he's playing a different match than everybody else,
yeah,
right?
sure,
Like you're like,
sure.
what is Elmiron doing over there? There's no
Well, okay,
connection to
so
anything else that's happening.
yeah, I see what you're saying. Often those play like what I see Neto doing is he is doing is he's advancing the ball like 50 yards up the pitch in a lightning quick
Right,
speed. The
right,
problem is he advances the ball that far and then he gets up there and it's just kind of like it's like I'm
yeah,
imagining somebody in World War I like puts his head up over the trench and just like runs into no man's land. And he's like,
yep,
"Well, I thought everyone was coming with me." And then he just
yeah,
gets gunned down by Virgil van Dijk or something like that. I don't know. So yeah,
yeah.
that's I have more time for Neto, I guess, and I
I mean,
just
I rate him. Like
sure.
it's just that I just kind of frustrating.
Yeah, I didn't think that Huang had a great match in terms of filling the channels and immediately giving Neto options once he got the
Yeah,
ball on the right wing. I
yeah. I thought
Wang, Wang,
he
not a
had
lot of
one really
chemistry.
good
Maybe because
run. Yeah.
Wang was away at the Asian Cup for a certain amount of time. That some chemistry needs to be built back up.
All right. Well, we've probably spent enough time on the Wolves Sheffield United match. We've done like a hard
Yes,
15 on
plenty.
that now. But let's why don't can we see your team, Brandon, for game week 26? Let's see. You sort of uniquely, I think. You must have one of the most unique teams in the top million. You have, I think, like 7 players tomorrow in the West Ham Brentford
Basically,
match.
yeah, all of my squad is left to play now. So let's see. You
A
should be
full
able
11.
to. So you can see Botman's -2 on the bench, and yeah, actually, we are on the same number of points. If you take your net with the -4, I'm on 52 total, and not a terrible game week rank, sub 2 million. That's and I have every opportunity to grow, as you
Mhm.
say, with Suchek, who is just like I've been saying, never bench Cole Palmer by having somebody like Thomas Suchek on your bench. And weeks like this, I get kind of giddy at like the one or two
Yeah.
opportunities I get this season to play him. And you
Yeah.
never know what you're going to get from the Brentford defense. So I don't know, Thomas Suchek, maybe he does something. But it really
Yeah.
it really does come down to Ivan Toney, and he is, I think, a secret weapon for a lot of managers who have him, and West Ham being in the form that they're in, and Tony being in the opposite direction, being in good form, you have to think that he is good for a goal on Monday against West Ham, and that will be huge for me this week, game week.
Yeah, I feel like you're probably in the best. I mean, yeah, this is just it's a nice run for you because you're pretty much locked into a green arrow at this
Yeah.
point, right? There's almost no
Sure,
way
I'm
you
on
could
a green arrow right now,
Yeah,
and I think there are a lot of managers out there that maybe just have Areola left to play. So
yep,
I've covered the West Ham defense as so much as that needs covering, and I've got Tony. So I'm with you. I'm really happy. I think I've got a lock on all of my head-to-heads as well. So,
yeah.
I mean, how are you feeling not having any? Well, you've got Areola to play,
I've got
right?
Areola. Yeah, I
Okay.
would have had Areola no matter what
Yeah.
because Dubravka is out. Is he like? It's not even injured, right? He's just been dropped,
He had
and
an illness. He had
he had
an
an
illness, was
illness.
my
Okay,
understanding.
okay.
And I don't think Karius and Karius's performance, I don't know, it wasn't like as diabolical as this Champions League final, but Dubravka's not losing his spot, I don't think.
Why not
What
though? I mean, I thought Karius was okay, and Dubravka's been extremely mediocre.
Yeah.
So I wonder if Karius actually does keep his spot.
Well, I speaking of goalkeepers, I do have to admit to the sin of not having faith in Fulham against Manchester United, and I thought Fulham was going to struggle in the midfield without Polini on a yellow card suspension, so that's why I played Areola over Leno, and for a while it looked like Fulham were a lock for a
Yeah.
clean sheet, and they
Yep.
did very well in the midfield against Manchester United, and they were good for that win. That was great to see. But Leno dropping to 3 points with the yellow card, uh, I, I I still feel like maybe I made a decent decision. Areola could definitely get
Oh
three
yeah.
points in that
Yeah.
Brentford match.
Yeah. I feel like if you were offered three right now from Leno or the kind of opportunity for more with
Hmm.
Ariel, you got to go for it there.
Yeah.
I think they probably end up with the same number of points,
So
honestly.
I said this last week. Tony, he got out. I dropped Solanke for Tony, and that was proved to be a bad move in the double game week. If Tony gets anything against West Ham, then that transfer would turn out to bear fruit. The other transfer I made last week was Ake, and he comes through with a clean sheet. So that's fine. All is forgiven with Nathan Ake. So yeah,
Yeah.
on the whole, I'm really pleased with that. And having Watkins and Saka and Foden, these are three players who have just nonchalantly carried both of us, honestly, over the last month. And I assumed always that I was going to drop Foden for Salah. And now I have a really difficult decision because Saka's undroppable, Foden is undroppable. I really don't know how Salah comes back into this team at
Well,
this point.
well, and at this point, it feels less. I would say I was feeling pretty high on bringing Salah, and I'll actually, if you want, I'll share my
Yeah,
team
yeah.
now.
Let me stop sharing and you jump in here.
Yeah, I think that I'm in sort of a similar. I mean, our teams are actually right at the moment fairly similar. I would say.
Uh-huh.
Let's see here if I can get this. I'll share it. You know what? I'm sharing a window. Let's hold
Wonderful
on a
stuff.
second.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great stuff here. Hold on one second. Let me get
You
my
got
shop all
this.
ready
Yeah,
here.
I'm checking
I
out the
got this.
people
Yeah.
in the YouTube chat over here, and our friend Red Dagger has joined. So, what's up, James? Good to see you. FPL Planner, Ben S, Sean Murphy, Quixotic Fool says no apologies needed for last week. Of course there aren't. Thank you, Quixotic Fool. Good to
That's
see
that's
y'all.
that's more of a Brandon approach.
Yeah,
I felt
it's
bad.
totally fine. Yeah,
No.
if anybody on the YouTube live has any questions for us, just drop them in the chat. You got your team pulled up here, Joshua?
Yeah, I do. And yeah, so it's a pretty I actually feel kind of like I just overthought it a little bit this week, and I have let's see, I'm on 56 points, but that does include a -4 for I brought in Solanke and Huang. I pretty much did the template moves this week, and I'm just sort of annoyed at myself because I really just didn't need to bring in Solanke. And now, granted, if that header, if he scores in that header, I feel a lot better about things. Right? It was basically clawed off the line, and he probably finishes on some bonus there as well. My thinking was just that there was a reasonable chance of an attacking return. I make this move ahead of game week 28, and it sort of frees up another transfer. I didn't think that Robinson would. I would have actually felt even worse if Fulham had kept the clean sheet, because then it really would. Then would have been like a 8-point swing.
Yeah.
In the end, it was a 4-point swing. Then Lascelles even came on for a crazy point. So I really didn't even make any transfers this week. I would have been fine. I would have. Let's see. I got 5 points from my transfers.
Should have bench boosted
on
Josh.
on a -4, and I would have had 3 if I just forgot the deadline. I would have been ahead by 2 points. So yeah, but sometimes it is nice just to do the -4 in a week when everybody else is taking hits, and I just get the transfer out of the way. Again, the Huang one is the one I'm just sort of kicking myself about still, especially because Luiz also has a great fixture in 27, right? They play Luton away. I mean, if anything, you can make an argument for just straight up moving Huang to well, honestly, it just sort of, it really depends. I mean, Luiz may end up in my team still by 29, and I think on a free hit, a lot of us will have him for 29. And the real question, and we can sort of I'll keep my team up here, but the real question is, excuse me, I need to
Keep it together, buddy. We get the cough button going here.
Is
the real question how bad are Newcastle, Josh? Because that's where Huang
Yeah.
is going. Since he's going to St. James Park in game
That's
week
true.
27.
That is true. Well, the real question is what's going to happen in the FA Cup, right? We have the West Ham match tomorrow, but almost more importantly, we have a ton of FA Cup fixtures set up for. I think it's Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. No, actually, it's Monday. Excuse me, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. But I almost completely forgot about Coventry hosting Maidstone United, which
Big
is
match.
that's kind of a fun match. I mean, Maidstone into the final 16. That's sort of. I think you
just because you like the name doesn't mean anything, Josh.
Well, it's a team I've never heard of, and anytime a team I've never heard of makes the final 16, I'm kind of excited about it, right? So that means one of those two will be in the quarterfinals, which is kind of insane. But anyway, we have a bunch of squads that play, a bunch of Premier League squads that play in the FA Cup midweek. We didn't even talk about Liverpool Chelsea at all, which is kind of an insane win for Klopp. Like, I wish he wasn't leaving, Brandon. I got to tell you, it's he brings the fun. He basically had a youth squad that won that match. And I mean, granted, Virgil van Dijk was scored twice, honestly, to win that game. And so Van Dijk scores the game-winning goal in extra time, and which I have to imagine is going to have a little bit of an impact on the FA Cup at midweek, right? And maybe most importantly is the Chelsea Leeds match. That's on Wednesday at 7:30 UK time, 2:30 our time here on the East Coast, Brandon. But so the big question is, will we get an Arsenal Chelsea match in game week 29? We will get an Arsenal Chelsea match in game week 29, which is again, that's the quarterfinal weekend for the FA Cup. So a bunch of teams won't play that weekend, right? Because they'll be in the quarterfinals, and so those matches will get postponed into the April and May fixtures, right? So if Leeds beat Chelsea on Wednesday, Arsenal and Chelsea will play in game week 29. And so that's pretty significant, I would say, right? You and I both have Palmer. We both have Gabriel. We both have.
I have Saliba. You have Gabriel.
Or exactly. You have Saliba. I have Gabriel. And so suddenly, I'm not sure, if I would free hit in 29. I don't know if you really need to, right? I mean, I think that you could make a transfer for 27 that had 29 in mind, or save your transfer. I think you could still have a couple of players for the double in 28, and then you could maybe take like a -4 for 29 and have enough to get by, right? In order to save that free hit. You could have 8 or 9 players, which is, I think, plenty for a blank game like that.
Yeah, I'm curious to see and how much gas did Chelsea use up against Liverpool in the League Cup final. That how are they gonna? They are hosting Leeds at Stamford Bridge, so I think Chelsea playing at home will be helpful and a little bit more comforting to them. And I mean, I don't know. Is Patrick Bamford going to score another worldie? So far, he's got apparently the best English goal that's been scored this season.
Well, I
I
haven't
don't
even
know.
seen
I
it.
think.
I gotta hunt that down.
Oh yeah, definitely look it up. Yeah, this is amazing, like turn and volley into the far corner. Patrick Bamford, what a beauty! He remains a beauty. I just still assume I'm going to be playing my free hit in game week 29, and I think that's why I'm a little bit more sanguine about the Huang He Chan move because I just don't know that that would have fully impacted how things are going to go in 29. So yeah,
Right.
we'll see about that.
Well, and one thing to think about, I think that we don't really need to make any decisions right now on this, on Sunday evening. I think that we'll know a lot more in the next couple of days. We could see crazy upsets, or we could see all chalk, right? And if we sort of
Hmm.
end up with a bunch of the kind of predicted fixtures, which are all pretty bad, then a free hit probably makes sense because you just don't want to waste transfers on players like that, right? And rather field a full 11. And it's kind of sometimes it's fun to free hit like with like players you would never otherwise have, right? Fill up that squad with pure garbage, Brandon. Like, it might be the one time I can have Muniz, right? Frankie, Malcolm the middle star, Frankie Muniz's
Hmm.
child, Muniz, has been tearing it up for Fulham, right? Doing a great job. And I think it's, it could be a fun opportunity to have him for 29. So I will say I have been um, looking at what I want to do for, and so I shared my screen for 20, for the current game week, but let me actually move ahead to 27 here as well.
By all
and
means, yes.
and I have what is actually, like a pretty decent squad, I think, for 27, kind of just right now. Like it's a probably, like, I could hold my transfer type squad. uh the question is, do I move, like Foden could move to Sun or Salah, right? And that would be the kind of like go for it move. And I think it really kind of depends on where you are a little bit in the, in terms of your overall rank. And for me, it's like I'm sort of okay with doing that because I'm a little mired in my rank. And so making a slightly aggressive move for a high ceiling player is something that I'm okay with doing, right? Like if I were to bring in, I mean, Salah, we just don't know about, right? If Salah wasn't even healthy to make the bench for the League Cup final, I,
Yeah,
I don't know how super confident we can feel about him even starting next week. And of course, we'll get more
certainly.
information over the next couple of days.
Yeah, my Sala plans, as everyone's, has just been put on the back burner because, as you say, we don't know, and
Yep.
I guess that's nice in a way that when Sala comes back, that's just like an automatic transfer that people will have to make.
Yep.
But now we have game weeks coming up where we just get to play around a little bit more with our
Yeah.
squad. So I
Yep.
agree. I mean, for me, it's really all in the defense. The Pau Torres injury saga just keeps on going. It's
Yeah.
such a disaster for anybody who. And I know there were a number of managers who bought Pau Torres to try to get in the Villa defense this week, so it's even more painful for them.
Hmm.
And I'm yeah looking at my game week 27 squad. I can throw that up on the screen here
Yep.
and show you what decisions I have to make, which really do all revolve around my defense. So I've got Issa Kabore for Luton Town, who's lost his starting place, and Luton are better for it. Pau Torres, who is injured, and Nathan Ake. Like, I feel like the move for the Manchester City defense was a very short term, double game
Right.
week motivated thing. So I have three defenders, and also Botman is playing for a defense that's utterly it's just like
I really,
shattered
I,
at this
I
point.
know it's like, I feel like I kind of said my piece on Twitter yesterday, and so I don't need to like rehash a little bit. But I'm kind of surprised that Howe is still employed by Newcastle after a match like that. Like I don't know. It's like every squad we saw with Klopp today, right? Like every squad has had a lot of like every top squad has had like a ton of injuries, including Man City, right? Who were without Haaland for a month and a half. But Newcastle's the only team that kind of folded up shop, right? And it feels like I don't know. I mean, I know Joe Linton is like a huge miss for them, but that was like insane. Like I don't know. Like I mean, Arsenal had just been held, without a shot versus Porto, and Newcastle were like it was like they were trying to make them feel better about themselves. Like it was a crazy. Like they just let him absolutely, run riot in that match. It was crazy.
Yeah, there was some interesting analysis that I saw. I think it was on the 442 YouTube page about the Champions League match against Arsenal, where sorry, who was it that Arsenal played against?
Porto.
Porto, right? Yeah, who they mastered the mid block against Arsenal, just clogged the midfield entirely, and Arsenal are continually stymied by that. And you would point the finger at Eddie Howe for being tactically inept in that. But on the other hand, you think Eddie Howe is saying, well, Newcastle are what we are because of some identity that is not necessarily involving the mid block. I don't know enough about Eddie Howe's tactics, but I agree. I mean, to compare anybody to Jurgen Klopp is kind of crazy. Klopp is singular, and that victory in the League Cup is all Klopp's. Like for those young kids to come on that pitch and there to be that level of continuity in the squad is just incredible, and all credit goes to Klopp.
Yeah, I just think I think with New. I mean, listen, do I think that Howe should be managing them? Not really. No, I think it was like a short term. He was like it was like a caretaker hire, right? That sort of like run its course a little bit. I will say, you obviously have to lay some of the blame on the players too. I thought Bruno Guimaraes had a really terrible match. Kieran Trippier, it's like it. I mean, he just like you can see why he's bounced around, like despite how talented he is, right? Because like defending has to be part of his position, right? And it's a little bit like a Trent situation where it's like the attacking prowess has to be so good to make up for how much he gets skinned, on the as a right back. I mean, I thought he had a really terrible match as well, and across the board, Shar. I mean, like nobody had a good match for Newcastle.
Yeah, you wonder if they're just totally out of gas. You just like look back at that home victory against PSG in the Champions League, and you think there's no ceiling for this Newcastle squad, and then suddenly here we are, and it's top level. Like when the floor comes out from under you, you've got a long way to fall. So
which again, I just think I mean, I don't mean to be one of those football fans who's like sack the manager every time, but it just feels like I don't know. I also feels like the identity changed a little bit. Like what happened to last year? Like last year they went and there was a 0-0 draw, and the team is not radically different than it was last season.
What about Ten Hag? Compare Eric Ten Hag to Eddie Howe. Who should get sacked first?
Yeah. I want them both. Yeah, I mean, at least Ten Hag's had a nice run. Like he has had a quite a nice run, and then they were sort of hit. I think quite unlike. Like they're basically their inform forward. Came down with what was it, a hamstring or something? Like he basically got injured like on the eve of the match, and that happens to everybody. But I think for them especially, they were really starting to kind of rely on him as the sort of talismanic player, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that I do feel like he deserves a little bit of slack for that. I mean, losing late is just it's interesting. I think there were two different key goals scored, like I think after the 7th minute of extra time and then the matches, and I'm a fan of it. I like it. I mean, I'm not sure if it's actually good for fantasy or not. Kind of depends on whether you're holding a defender or an attacking player in a game, but I am all about give me as much match time as possible, because it just sort of gets that like kind of simmering frustration when a player fakes an injury or whatever, right? Or goes down with cramp, or it's like all this sort of like all the kind of whatever, like the dark arts stuff that everybody, that all squads and players are guilty of, right? It just sort of like it feels like it just sort of fixed it, right? Because you're like, okay, if this happens, they're going to add on 7 minutes at the end, and I'm sort of
a little bit like I'm sure I'm the only one listening to this who's ever watched On Cinema at the cinema, but there's a running joke there where the two main characters rate movies based almost solely on how long they are, and the longer the movie, the better it must be. So, The Hobbit's a great movie, and any Premier League match that goes beyond 97 minutes, also a great match.
All right. Well, let's. Yeah, I mean, I can't. I can't remember if you were like a little on the fence about the longer matches or not, but
Well, I err toward it's like VAR to me. You're just fixing sort of non-existent problems or problems of your own making with
yeah,
the added time. And I think if there was just a little bit more presence of the officials IRL on the pitch, you'd have less time wasting and less need for VAR. So
right.
that's just
Well,
like,
that's
and
assuming you can fix the. Yeah,
VAR perpetuates the absenteeism of the referees on the pitch, because the referees on the pitch are like, well, I'm not really in control here, so
yeah,
let's just let them kick the ball around and
yeah.
you know, yeah, I don't
Now
know,
I'm like
drink
I'm
beer
gonna have
and
to be
eat
like a
nachos in the
manager.
stands. I don't know.
It's like one of my work meetings now where I'm like, we're gonna have to spin this off into a separate meeting. You know, we're gonna spin this conversation about
Okay, great.
extra
Yeah,
time
let's have a
VAR.
breakout session about
Yeah.
rules of the game.
All right. Well, let's look ahead to. Oh, actually, first of all, I want to just do a quick shout out to our Patreon supporters. You can go to patreon.com/alwayscheating to support the podcast. We really appreciate it, and I feel like this is around the time of the year when I note that during our off season we do not charge Patreon supporters. So if you're like like I'll just wait until next August, why not join now? Hop on that Discord, Brandon. You were talking about best places to watch football in Brighton
Yeah.
in the UK. Like there are all sorts of not Brighton, Michigan, Brandon, but Brighton and lower
I'm sure
lower England. Yeah,
there can't possibly be any. Yeah. So
there might.
shout out to Swaltz on the Discord, who's got the download on
Yeah,
Blind Busker, great place, and also there was some other place that he mentioned in Brighton, the
yeah,
Font, also.
yeah. I know we have to reach out to our old buddy Joe too, right? He's a Brighton man.
Joe and Az,
Uh,
yeah, right.
yeah. But I wanted to, our Premier League second half league is now live, and unfortunately, it's too late to join that. But that's the sort of stuff that we're doing on the Discord, and we also do an extra podcast each week. And that podcast did not get skipped last week, Brad. We did an hour plus on that podcast. And those tend to be a little looser, and some people actually prefer, Brandon, the looser Patreon pods that we do on Thursday. So
Yeah.
if you want to say thanks, support what we do, you can go to patreon.com/alwayscheating to get that extra podcast, to get the Discord, to get discounts on merch, to get shout outs on the podcast, and just support the cheaters. I wanted to also say a quick thanks to our newest producer, Brandon. We have a new producer this week, Brian Clark.
Yeah, who is it?
It's Brian Clark. Thank you to Brian Clark. And also welcome to another new Patreon supporter we got this week, which is Larry Hambo. So thank you to Larry.
What a
great
name.
Yeah, I love it. Love the name Larry Hambo. So thank you to our newest Patreon supporters. And I think I cut you off. You were about to say something, I think.
Oh, I had absolutely nothing to say other than my undying love for our Patreon supporters, and I love interacting with you on the Discord, and I hope to see you all there. Josh, shall we look ahead? Shall we shift gears? Some people downshift, slow down. Let's speed up. Let's upshift. I feel like this podcast is like on the on ramp onto the freeway. I've been struggling with how to get used to using my speedometer in kilometers here in Canada, as opposed to miles per hour. So if I were to say to you, Josh, the speed limit is 110 kilometers per hour, how many miles per hour would you be going on the freeway?
Ooh, is that like 85 or something like that?
A little less than that, closer to 70, 75.
Okay.
So I'm going to be looking out for you.
Don't they usually have them like, is it because it's an all digital readout? Because I feel like the old school ones, you could see the kilometers and the miles like.
Oh, I don't have a digital readout on my car. My car is not nice or fancy or anything like that. But it's like the smaller dial, and often the needle blocks. It can like block out the all important number. You're like, am I going 110 or 120 kilometers an hour here? Okay. All right. Well, so what do we make of the fixtures coming up?
Yeah, I think it's actually a pretty interesting week for fixtures. I think that it's let me pull up the fixtures here so we can share and look at them together here, Brandon. As
Let's do it.
So I think that it's there are some really interesting decisions ahead. I will say again, this is like one of my little um, pet peeves or bugaboos or whatever you want to call it, Brandon, which
Sure.
is inconsistent scheduling. Like, why is there no early match next Saturday? Why do the Sunday matches both start at weird times that that don't make any sense? Why was there a 3 p.m. Eastern match last weekend and none? And now there's just 7 matches, or I guess there's 6, all at the exact same time on Saturday. What is going on? Like, why? How can it be this chaotic, Brandon? I
I
don't understand it.
assume the late match this Saturday was Arsenal Newcastle. Maybe was moved because of the FA Cup final, but they already knew
Yeah,
when the
wouldn't
FA Cup final was going to be.
I
But
don't. Yeah, I
anyway,
don't.
like
That
a
wouldn't affect
broadcasting
anything.
thing,
Yeah, yeah.
uh, who knows?
All
Who
right.
knows?
Well, let's not carry any water for these Premier League schedulers, Brandon. I'm
Yeah.
sure it's a difficult job. I will reluctantly caveat. But kick one of these onto the late window on Saturday, right? Like, how fun would it be if Brentford Chelsea were the final match on Saturday, for example,
Well,
right?
listen, we know how impossible train travel is that late at night, quote unquote, in England.
Yeah.
So, it's
You know,
impossible to get to these places.
I will say, just we don't need to go through every single one of these fixtures here, but Chelsea played 120 minutes today. Basically, played through their entire squad. It was like um, I don't know. If you're a Chelsea supporter, you don't need me to add on to whatever you're feeling right now, right? So we'll just leave that one uncommented upon.
They
But
went to
uh,
Wembley. Don't cry for them. That's fine. You got a cup final. That's great. More
easy
than most
draw,
clubs get.
Yeah, yeah. But they played Liverpool's C team and couldn't score a goal. But I think it's they're so they play 120 minutes. They have a midweek FA Cup match, which is like a fairly important match for them, right? They're not going to finish in a Champions League spot this year. It's like try to make another cup. Try again with the cup final, Brendan. Let's get back to Wembley for a semi. So they and then they play the early match on Saturday. So that is a lot of football, right? That
Yeah.
is a ton of matches, and I think if it's a draw, I think they do extra time now from the round of 16 on, but like there's no replay, right? So they'll just go into extra time there. So they in theory could play like 240 minutes in 5 days, or in 4 days ahead of the early match on Saturday. So it's a great match if you hold any Brentford players. And Ivan Toney is going to score at least a goal, if not 2 goals in
So
this
yeah,
match. I feel extremely good about that.
this is the conundrum I have because I'm on the Tony train, but Solanke, I have always planned to move Tony back to Solanke ahead of his double in 28. And how do you weigh the appeal of Tony against Chelsea versus Solanke against Burnley, who are totally listless and bad? And you, I feel like maybe they cancel each other out, so don't spend
Yeah.
too much time
Don't
thinking
I
too
would
much
not
about it.
I would not be wasting a transfer taking Tony out at home against a Chelsea team that's going to be like absolutely gassed. Like I think
Hmm.
yeah, that would not be on my radar at all. I mean, just make the move in 28, right? There's just no need to rush
Yeah,
that move.
that's the best plan, I think. And as I was saying earlier, I've got actual problems to fix elsewhere in my squad and my defense in particular.
Right.
But I wonder how much this game week could be decided in a weird like sub forward standoff between Tony and Solanke.
Yeah. I it could be. I mean, Bournemouth are away, although Tony or Solanke had a goal and assist in the Newcastle match. Weekend and
Hmm.
the previous weekend. So I don't think that changes things too much. If Bournemouth were home, I can understand the temptation a little more. But I think as is, I think you've got to hold
Yeah.
Tony for this one. It just sleep through that match. Just wake up at 10 because we all know the goals don't hurt as much if we're not watching them in real time, right? It's when you wake up, like when you look later and you just didn't watch the match, you're like, okay, well that happened, and I can just I
Who's
can process
sleeping?
that. And
Who's sleeping while their forward is playing in fantasy? Show me this person. Unless you live in Australia, I don't believe it.
No, I'm saying for you. Like if you don't have Solanke for this Burnley Bournemouth match,
Oh, sleep through
yeah,
the Bournemouth
yeah, you
match.
don't need to
Okay.
sweat. Yeah, exactly. No, you don't need to. I don't mean the 10 a.m.
Yeah,
Brentford Chelsea
just
match.
like just like have my wife hit me over the head,
Well,
knock me
that'd be all
unconscious for
six.
the
That'd be all six fixtures. Yeah, just sleep through all of them, Brandon. Yeah, so I think I do feel really good about Brentford's chances of winning that match. And Tony, that feels like I might have to go to my local betting parlor, Brandon. Not that we actually have those in America, but my virtual betting parlor, because I feel
Sure.
very good about Tony doing something in that match. It's a shame that there's the 28 for. Well, not a shame exactly, but because of that, well, actually, I think it puts you in a great spot because everyone who has Tony is going to, I think, be in a very good spot this weekend, but no one really wants to bring him in, right? If they don't
Right.
have him already, so it's a fun
That's
spot.
true.
It's a fun place to own a player. I think what the big question for this weekend is, who are we captaining, right? I think that there are a number of really good captain picks, right? You have the Holland, who is perpetual captain, right? Always like permanent perma
He's
captain
stinking it
material.
up, Josh. He's not pulling his weight.
Yes, he has been indeed stinking it up, and yeah, and not looking great either, right? Like,
No.
I mean, I guess that's what stinking it up means, but it's like he really has been like it's not like he's gotten like a little unlucky. He's just sort of he's just off it. He's been off
His
it. He
finishing
had
has
that
been poor.
his finishing has been poor, right? And this is still a guy who scored, I think, 3 Premier League goals in the last 3 matches. So
So the
it
stat
is,
was, if you
yep,
look
they're
back
full
at
matches.
Holland last season, he overperformed his XG by something like 5 to 7 goals, and this season he's underperforming his XG by 3 to 5 goals. I don't remember the
Right.
exact stats, but what
This is
what
why
that
we should be doing fantasy seasons on a 10-year window, Brandon. We should be the end of this season should be the end of 10% of the fantasy game, right? It's a
yeah.
for in order for it to be fair, we have to look at through a much longer lens than we
Yeah.
currently do.
Well, John McKenzie at Tifo IRL did this analysis, I think inspired by this Holland XG comparison of what's different with Holland's finishing the season. And he timed every shot that Holland has taken, like from ball touch to releasing a shot. And Holland is taking all of his shots this season much more quickly. And that
Mm,
it's like when a player puts on more muscle mass, like when Tiger Woods puts on a bunch more muscle mass, he has to retrain himself for his golf swing. Or
right.
Michael
Right.
Jordan famously like put on a bunch of muscle and he had to basically tool up his jump shot
Yeah.
because of it.
Worked for
And is
Jordan,
this
didn't work for Tiger.
so?
Yeah.
And what's going on with Holland? Is he going through something like that where he's trying to improve his game and in the process he's going through this growing pain, or is he just having an off season? Unclear.
The psychology of him is like he's as close to an actual alien. I mean, it's funny. I mean, we know that he has a famous father, and I know that he is not from Mars or whatever. But like, I find it very hard to have any sense of what his process is, how he thinks about anything. Like, it feels like he's the most it's like he's like Frankenstein. It's like he's been given a set of instructions, and he just like
Frankenstein's monster. Come on now.
Frankenstein's
You read the
Frankenstein's
book.
monster. That's I can't believe I made that blunder. But yeah, it's like he's been given a set of instructions, and he will follow them, right? And that's sort
He
of
always seems.
yeah.
I like how he's always seems very happy. Like if he misses his chance, but then Phil Foden scores, Holland looks
You're right.
genuinely happy that
He
he's part
isn't
of a team that's winning, right?
he isn't like I think like many of us, I do secretly love to like assess how happy how happy forwards are when another
Yeah,
player on their team scores a goal.
yeah,
Like, are they actually, especially if they were like begging for the ball and they didn't get it? Like there
yeah,
was that happened to
right.
somebody, I think it might have been Gabriel Jesus recently or something like that, but he was like begging for the ball and then Martinelli scored or something like that. And Gabriel was like so mad still, but he kind of reluctantly like trudges over to
Just thumbs up, like
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
mm-hmm,
Yeah,
yeah,
whoever the ninth guy is who joined the group hug is the one who really
yeah.
is the most
The guy was like, I
envious.
can't leave the field of play, or else somebody's getting a yellow card here. So maybe that should be me.
Yeah, exactly. So I think So yeah, so we have Holland, we have Son, I think would be another kind of sneaky option if he's I'm starting to see his name pop up a lot as a possible transfer option. I think that makes a lot of sense. They're obviously fully rested at this point and playing a Crystal
Yeah.
Palace team that at the very least is going to be shipping goals. And then I think the big one, maybe the best one, is Saka. Played in Sheffield United, who we've kind of said our piece about them already. But um, why would I go with Erling Haaland over Bakary Saka? Is my question for you, Brandon.
Um, well, I think you go based on the Manchester derby, and historically, and a brief history it is for Erling Haaland in the derby, but he just absolutely loves destroying Manchester United. So, how much do you trust the historical matchup for a player versus what you're seeing in a player's current form? And that's what it comes down to with Haaland. You did. I think you skipped over Aston Villa at Luton. I mean, if you want a player who's
Sure.
in
Yeah.
form, you would go for Ollie Watkins. But is it Aston Villa away from home is kind of has been
Hard to
a
say though,
scary thing.
right? I
Yeah.
mean, that Sheffield match where Watkins had the hat trick was away, right? A couple weeks ago, and
Hmm.
so maybe they've gotten that off their. I don't know, just that yeah. I mean, you're right to throw them in there because the Villa squad that we saw on Saturday looked very good, right? Outside of their obvious defensive
Yeah.
um, issues, which I think were just kind of born from some injuries and stuff like that. I
Sure.
think in general, I consider them to be a pretty defensively solid
Yeah.
team. Matty Cash had another tough game. What a
He's
weird
had a
season for
terrible
him.
season. Yeah.
He had like 8 good weeks to start off, though. Like it was like he sort of had this moment, and then it was like, yeah, I don't know, it's weird. Moreno is definitely the like unlucky, like the unlucky FPL player of the moment,
He's
right? It
the
feels
new
like
Luca
it's
Dean.
yeah,
It's like
yeah, it's
Dean
true.
was replaced with Dean
Yeah.
2.0, which is great.
Yeah,
So yeah.
there was some moment on the bench where you saw Dean and Emery were going back and forth about something on the bench in that match yesterday, and it was
Yeah.
like Dean was like kind of, I don't know if he was quite yelling at Emery, but he was vehemently disagreeing with him about something, and I was like, why is Dean like talking tactics with Emery right now? I was like,
I
what is
can't.
going on?
I can't imagine what that how horrible that conversation must have been.
It didn't
But
really make a
let's
lot of
come back
sense.
to the Holland captaincy thing. I want your take on this. I feel like I'm gravitating toward Holland again, and I guess it's just because I think there's like a fireworks factory that's ready to go off in
Yeah,
a match like that. And having watched, you mentioned Ten Hag like took with Hoyland at the helm, Manchester United through a good run of form. Manchester United could not have looked worse than they did against Fulham, as well as Fulham played.
sure.
And they will go into the Etihad where and they just could it could be another bloodbath, I think.
Well, it's possible, although that isn't really Man City's style this year, right? Like
Hmm.
their
Yeah.
style is a 1-0 style, 2-0 style.
A 1-0
They
bloodbath.
Yeah, a lot of yeah, honestly, that is their specialty this year. It's a one
Yeah.
nil match where it never really feels like the other team could score. And Chelsea went in there and held them to a scoreless draw. It was a scoreless draw, right? Was it a 1-1 draw? It was a 1-1 draw, excuse me. They had Sterling and Rodri both scored in that match. But they held Man City to a goal, right? And Brentford held Man City to was it one goal or two? I can't remember, but it was a low scoring match, and then obviously Bournemouth held him to a goal as well. So I agree with you in a general sense. Like I do think that, and there's like there's home versus away too. It's a little bit of a something to take into consideration as well. But at the moment, I'm actually leaning towards Saka, partially because I think it's like born out of this game week, and I'm actually on a green arrow, so I don't know why I'm so like I'm not like you know so I'm not like in a terrible place by any means, but I'm just feeling like I'm not like I don't have control of my season at the moment, and it feels like I'm just like doing what I should do every week. It's like every transfer recently has been like the transfer I should make and the captaincy
Mhm.
choice I should make. And by and large, it's worked, right? And so I don't really know what the problem is exactly, other than it doesn't feel super fun to me. Like I don't feel like I'm making fantasy fun again. And I realize that doing well is actually secretly low key the best way to make fantasy fun. But I also feel like I'm a little more inclined to gamble right now. And like the idea of gambling on like an insanely informed Saka, playing Sheffield United, while Holland is going to be highly captained
Mhm.
and like a little off his form. Like it does feel like there's maybe this feels like the right week to
Yep.
maybe go for it a little bit. Like because it almost feels like the respective floors are high for both, right? It's like so it doesn't really matter that much in a way, right? It's like you can kind of crush yourself in this kind of stuff. But what is the floor for Saka, right? It's like 5 or 6 points in that. Like it's just hard for me to imagine him getting nothing from it, right? So it doesn't feel like a hugely risky captaincy from that perspective either.
Yeah, I think you've made a pretty good argument for Saka there. And hey, in the MFFA parlance, to have a captain in the final fixture, a Monday
Always fun.
fixture no less, is that's
Mm-hmm.
a lot of fun.
clear
So I
clear
like
your
that.
schedule. Yeah, if you're an American, put a dentist appointment on your calendar for Monday. Not that I would ever do this, of course, Brennan, but if you're
Certainly.
somebody else might do that for Monday, March 4th at 3 p.m. and get ready for some fun. All right, Brennan, let's take a couple more questions here. I'll get I guess I'll just keep the fixtures up here for anybody to look at if they want to see them. So with a couple questions we had about game week 26. Scully, we did Scully's question already, didn't we? And Ryan asked, is Foden, who's been very good recently, worth selling for Son or Salah, or is it too much of a luxury move? So this is a question that you and I are both actually on our minds a little bit. I imagine, right? I've got
Yeah.
Foden right now and some money in the bank.
I guess you could argue it both ways, where there should be no fantasy assets so precious that you can't drop them. And I think that's where a lot of managers get hurt, is they're too reticent to get rid of a player just
Yeah.
because they think there's potential there. And Foden is like he's already, I think, reached his season goal scoring record. And there's a lot of season in Europe left to go for Manchester City. So he's having his best
Hmm.
goal scoring season to date. So
Yep.
it's all upside. There's every reason to keep him. But then you just have to look at Salah's potential is just frankly it's higher than Foden's. So how do you fit both of them into your team? Maybe it's possible, and I think if we just go a little lighter up top, I think people have had the freedom to invest a lot of money in their front three forwards, and now we have to start looking maybe at going to a 3-5-2
Oh my
again, or
gosh. Wow. See, now I feel like you're advocating for a position that you don't believe in or won't do yourself.
no, no,
Yeah.
I'm not. I'm not necessarily saying what I would do, but I just think these are
Yeah.
this is a way you can think about it. Like
Right.
this is a way you
Right.
can have your cake and eat it too. Why not
Right.
have both?
But you
And
can't.
I think
Yep.
ultimately what I would coach would be you got to make some painful decisions when at this point in the season. And I do think if you compare Foden to Son or Salah, those players are going to outscore him down the home stretch. Would be my educated guess.
I think it's yeah, I'm sort of leaning towards Foden out as well. I don't know why, because he's been excellent for me. It just feels like some of the goals he's scored have been a little scrappy, right? He's not. It's a little bit like Alvarez, right? Where there's sort of there's just one player who matters for Man City, and that's like maybe KDB when healthy, right? Obviously he's sort of in that. It's so interesting. There's so many players right now who are in this zone of like I gotta get him out. And, like a Stupinan is like that for me as well, and but I think that KDB is like that for
Yeah,
many
we got a
too.
question from Brian in the YouTube chat about Darwin Nunez. What do you do if
Mhm.
you still have Darwin? And that's I feel like we talked about two great opportunities this game week with Tony and Solanke. I think Darwin to Solanke this week is an easy move. So do that one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just another player that is a great player who you're kind of like, I got to get rid of this guy.
Yeah. I think the problem is we probably won't get enough information. I mean, I don't know. Maybe he plays at midweek and he's fine. Even then, it's almost like there's no good. I mean, maybe if he plays 30 minutes late in the FA Cup, you feel it's like there's just it's just hard to like really feel. Wait. Now I've gotten confused here, Brandon. Is there an FA Cup match for Liverpool or not? Am I like totally out of my
I'll pull up the
skis
FA
here?
Cup schedule here.
Yeah. Liverpool play Southampton, right? So what would you even want as a Darwin and Salah owner for that match on Wednesday, right? It's like, I guess you'd want them to come on for the final 30 minutes and look great and like fully fit. Like that would, I guess that would be ideal. I mean, the problem is, I feel like the calculus for Klopp will be run it back with the young guys for midweek, bring some people back for game week 27, right? And then but they have to be careful because game week 28 is the most important game of the season for Liverpool, right? Liverpool and Man United or Man City play in game week 28. And if they can win that match or even hold into a draw, they're in a great spot going into the final 10 weeks of the season. If they lose that match, it's really going to be hard for them, I think, to win the title this year. Right. So I think they have to kind of gamble that they can beat Forest with a weakened squad, not rush anybody back. I mean, but I would imagine that by that weekend, everybody who's even remotely close to playing will be available. So so that to me, I guess I'm sort of like agreeing with you in like a long way. Like I think it's fine to hold Darwin if it looks really likely that he's going to start. I mean, I think that Forest are just not a super strong defensive team, and I think that they probably will score a couple goals in that match. But again, like it sort of makes sense to also like it's fun to have a player in the Sunday match, right? And Burnley are not good, so I think that having Solanke and then obviously because it's a movie you want to make anyway for 28, right? So I think there is a logic there. I saw there was also a question about Huang, and I think that Huang is just I'm just going to bench him this week. And that's sort of where I am. I don't know if I quite have enough. Are you going to start him?
Absolutely.
Wait a new. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's like, I think that's fine. I don't know. It's just like, I sort of like,
You're putting him in the sin bin, the Josh Landon sin bin, and I respect
I think
that.
you're putting, yeah, it's like you're putting Newcastle there and I'm putting Huang there. We're both sin binning different, different
I'm starting
people right
Bodman.
now.
I'm
Are
starting
you?
Bodman and Wang. Yeah, listen, I don't understand the general. Some managers try to sort of play.
Yeah. Use
They say
strategy and try to.
no, it's like if I'm going to play Wang, I have to bench my Newcastle defender because I'm banking on Wang scoring. Well, I'm like, well, if Wolves don't score, then I've got a clean sheet. You're trying to diversify, get points any which way you can. So I'm fine playing both sides there, and I will start Wang.
Yeah.
And like,
I
there's
guess,
a reason why I
yeah.
brought him in. And Newcastle look trash right now. Long
Yeah.
story short.
I mean, I guess to me, it's more like what kind of story are you telling with the way you've set up your squad for a game week, right? And like if you're starting Twang there, is the story like they just look really good and stuff? I don't know, like what are your like because you've talked a little bit about maybe actually would you mind sharing your team again here, Brandon? Because I'm curious. You talked about your transfer decisions for 27.
Yeah,
And
can you if you stop sharing, I'll throw my team up there and we can talk a little bit about
yeah,
strategy
let's do
because
it.
I honestly don't have a transfer in mind right now. So are we going to get any news? Does news even matter with Pau the Wow Torres at this point? I don't think it does. Yet I feel like him at 4.5, he probably will just be thrown back on the bench. The smart move would probably be to turn Nathan Ake into a more useful player down the stretch. Probably somebody like Senesi, the Bournemouth defender, who will get a double for in 28. So I get a Bournemouth defender this transfer window. I get Solanke going to 28, and then I have two Bournemouth doublers, which seems fine to me. So that's where I'm leaning is Ake to Senesi.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I think that makes sense. I'm just sort of looking like
Here, I'm gonna put the Vice on Saka there. That looks good. That looks better.
there you go. And do you think that like I mean Kabore? I know he's like he got didn't he get some minutes in the
Yeah,
in 28-5?
he got a handful of minutes, but s- meaning what exactly? Like
Well, I guess it's just yeah. Well, just 'cause they have the double in 28, obviously. But if you're not planning to start him anyway for 28, like,
I
would it
don't
make
think
sense to
so.
just go Kabore to Senesi anyway? Like, right, and just like give yourself one extra player, like what like one extra. Like
Yeah,
Kazaki's not a terrible bench option. I'm actually starting him this week.
yeah, I don't disagree with that. I think Kabore, I ultimately want to move whenever I have a moment. Like, give me a minute, guys. Move him to another sub 4.5 defender.
Yeah,
So I'm still trying to be a little budget conscious as we figure out what's going on with the returning premium midfielders in Salah and Son. Maybe I'm overthinking that a little too much, but eh, yeah. So Ake or Kabore, certainly.
I think another thing to keep in mind too, and I think again we'll have a lot more clarity on this after the FA Cup matches at midweek, but at some point we are all going to get to wild card again, right? I mean, you could do it this week if you really wanted to. Like that's I in general my I like a good rule of thumb for me is I if I can look at my squad like and my bus team is all set up and I'm ready to go and I feel okay with how things are, I'm not going to wild card, right? But like I don't want to like I don't like a theoretical wild card where I'm like I like this wild card because I can do this and this and this and it's but it's like but I do think that we'll probably all start to wild card. I mean, I've already seen some talk about doing it like in like like this week, next week, and then like wild card early, free hit, and then kind of get yourself set up for the doubles. I suspect that my wild card will come in like the early 30s. That's my thinking right now.
The
I
dirty
don't.
30s.
I just don't. To me, I don't really. I haven't given it to like a ton of thought because I don't really want to lock myself in until I know what we're looking at for game week 29, right? And like
Yeah.
as long as that remains a riddle, it feels like kind of wasted energy for me to think about what I'm going to do for like the last 12 weeks of the season. I need to kind of I just need more information, right?
Right.
And
So are
yeah,
you
but
planning anything
yeah.
for this game week? Are you going to hold?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm in that Foden zone right now where Foden's got two pretty tough matches ahead, right? Man United and Liverpool, back to back weeks. Son hasn't played for a couple of weeks. And I actually was initially thinking Salah was the player that I was leaning towards, but again, it just really depends on 29 because Spurs do have a fixture in 29. So if it turns out that like the Chelsea Arsenal match is going through, then Son is kind of an easy move for me, right? Because I get him for 27 and then I have another player for 29 and he's probably slightly preferable to Foden like this game week and moving forward. All the reasons you articulated earlier, right? He's just
Yes.
a better long term over the final 12 weeks FPL asset.
Well, yeah, it's an interesting phase of the FPL calendar here where we kind of had a blockbuster double a game week ago. We
Yep.
had it's kind of a tactical blank. And now I think people might take their eye off the ball a little bit in the next couple of weeks. Maybe that means we don't need to have our eye on the ball all that much. We've got maybe we have to believe that we have good squads for the moment. Don't overthink it. As you say, wait to see how the FA Cup turns out and then the strategy gets like turned up to 11 after
Yep.
the next FA Cup draw.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think the FA Cup draw is like during the it's like
It's
I think it's
Wednesday
Tuesday.
evening, I
Is it
believe.
Tuesday, Wednesday? It's Wednesday. Yeah. So well let's end things with two final questions here, Brandon. One is from Lil Slurp. He says, who is a good Purvis? I believe he means Purvis Stupinan, one of the worst transfers I've made this season.
Hmm.
Who is a good Purvis replacement? I think there's a couple players that stand out. You talked about one already in Sinisi.
Yeah. Yeah, I like him. He going into the festive period was just on a run of attacking returns, and even though he's a center back, he reminds me a little bit of Nathan Ake, I guess, in that
Yeah.
he's pretty good on the ball. He's quite mobile and good on set pieces. So and you got that Bournemouth connection too. So how can top Senesi, Josh, with another pick?
Yeah. I mean, the only other thing would be like a second Arsenal player. I think that would be
Hmm.
another route to go. They kind of conceded. That was like a classic. That was actually you know what they conceded was a Man City style goal in
Yeah,
that Newcastle
right.
match, right? Like 86 minute. No one's really
Had to be
paying that
Joe
much
Willock.
attention.
I mean, come on.
Yeah, I know. It's his first goal this season too. It's crazy.
He was an
Um,
Arsenal player at some point,
he
if I
was,
remember
he was,
correctly.
yeah, about 3 years ago. I think he scored when he had that incredible run. I think he was on loan. Like, I mean, I think it turned into a permanent deal, but I think it was like
Right, of
the
course.
loan deal. Yeah.
God, he's just ruining every fantasy manager's week for nothing.
What about Doty? I mean, that was like you were very high
Hmm.
on him, but as the bloom off the rose a little bit after. I mean, reasonably so. I mean, he had an
Yeah.
amazing run in the late teens, early 20s fixture wise, but then the double was a disaster. And you know, maybe it's a little less exciting now, right? To have Doty.
Yeah, that's it. It's less exciting. He's still creating the chances. He's still on the set pieces. So there's reason to have him. He's an easy hold if you have him, and
Yeah,
I don't hate it. But when you've got Bournemouth, who are a better team, and if, watching Bournemouth play Man City to the tight 1-0 victory for City, Bournemouth were just on the front foot for the last 20 or so minutes of the match, and they looked exceptional. And it's really hard to deny what's happening there at Bournemouth. They're a great team. So I would be much quicker to invest in them right now than Luton Town.
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, maybe
and
Luton Town is just like there was a moment where we were like, well, is Luton Town good? I mean, Luton could still stay up if Everton continue to shoot themselves in the foot, but
yeah.
I can't. And like, it's just, yeah, you have to have maybe a reality check with Luton at this point.
Luton can score. I think that is
Yeah,
Luton's
that's
that is the great
yeah,
skill that Luton have. They can score, which is great because that means Luton are fun to watch. And
yeah.
I've said this before, but Luton have been a great pleasure. I think content wise, I've enjoyed their burnt orange kits all season. You know, there's like their players are kind of memorable and interesting. Like there's like I'm a big fan. Like if they stay
Yeah.
up, I am totally fine with that.
Yes.
We had a total 180 on Luton the last few months.
I can't fight the impulse though to order Little Caesars pizza whenever I see their orange kits.
What a great
So that's
impulse! Has that made its way to Toronto? It's just across the
there's
border, Michigan. So maybe there's
there's a
one.
place here that has all the Little Caesars like fonts and colors, but it's called Pizza Pizza, which of
It's got
course
to be
is
the
like
same
a
thing.
an
Yeah.
ad tagline. But I see
Hmm.
no Little Caesar guy anywhere. I see no Little Caesars trademark anywhere. So
Yeah.
I wonder if it's an off-brand sort of a
Right.
ripoff.
Maybe
Unclear.
they lost their franchise at some point,
Yeah.
maybe. Yeah. All right. Final question is from Moffat. He says, after a disastrous first half of the season, I'm now making big gains in mini leagues, and what seemed out of sight is now within reach. And being on a good run makes me hesitant to take. There's always a but coming, right, Brandon,
Yeah.
for an opening
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
Being on a good run makes me hesitant to take too much risk. So, what point and/or game week should I be ready to start firing at differential captains when I'm 30, 40 points behind the leaders? Obviously, not an easy.
I
There's not a clear answer here, but it's an interesting question. I
Well,
thought.
I think the clear answer is by asking this question, he's already blown it. Because when you get into that nice vein of form,
In the
the last
zone,
thing you want
yeah.
to do is to start like
Think of everybody
asking
else.
questions, second guessing, and yeah, questioning yourself. You should just go with whatever flow you've been in. And now you've spoken to your pitcher in the middle of a no hitter, as they say.
Yeah, I
So
think.
my feeling is don't go differential at all.
Yeah.
Because I'm getting from Moffat's question here that that's not what got him here.
Well, I also think that I would take issue with the question itself, and I think that it's you don't need differential captains. What you need are good transfers, right? And you should be making those no matter what, right? And so maybe at some point you start to think about transferred in low ownership players or something like that, right? To me, the captaincy is just it's just like a math game, right? It's like or whatever. It's like you just default to whoever like the Vegas odds are. I mean, maybe it's a little different because you have like assists and things like that too. But in general, it's like if some player is like widely favored to score, you just kind of should almost always go with them, right? But I think with transfers, there it can be a little more. You can be a little more thoughtful about it, and I'm sure that's
Yeah.
what has honestly driven his comeback, is not being weird and wacky with captaincies. It's just making good transfers and kind of beating the crowd, right? With his moves, and so maybe that's like the more positive way to think about it. Just keep doing what you're doing, right? And like you said, Brendan, he's already um,
He's
stepped
blown it.
on his own momentum. Yeah, but maybe he hasn't. Maybe there's still time for Moffat. Let's hold out hope.
Keep it up, Moffat.
Yep.
I'm watching for your Wordle scores more importantly.
Okay, there we go. Another reason to join the Discord, Brandon. So there you
Hmm.
go. Lots of fun little channels on there, as well as a great meetup channel. It's become an international meetup channel. We opened it up.
Yeah.
It used to be New York City. Now it's all across the world. All right. Well, on that note, Brandon, with that little bonus Patreon shout out at the end, that is your pod. So thank you to everyone for listening. Everyone who joined us. Thanks for all the questions, and we'll be back next week. We'll also be back at midweek with the Patreon pod. If you want to support the podcast, you can go to patreon.com/always cheating. Brendan, do you want to thank our producer patrons, including newest producer, Brian Clark?
Yeah. Big thanks to producers Mike DePietro, Trevor Ingerson, our buddy Chris Howell, Bob Schoon, James Holland, Dave Wagner, Lodal, Nick Wright, Lazaros Janos, Jesse Halstead, Bruce Kerr, Brian Chin, Blair Jacobson, Todd Byerly, Andy Portlock at FPL Merch, Kerry Swanson, Jefferson Turner, Buffalo Wildlings, Francis Moore, Sam Shower, Caleb Robbie, Vulgar, Paulson Kruger, Alex Holcomb, James Keatley, The Saint, Bob Fox, Craig Jackson, Shalon F. Kadakia, Terrence O'Donnell, Heath Cram, Thomas Tislov, Noah and Louise, Travis Grant, Linus Vennerstrom, Dan Parsons, James C., Matthew Skinner, Fro Jacobson, Brennan, Daniel Hart, Lolly, Ben Coombs, Eric Kite, Gareth H., Rune Sandberg, and there's that man again, Brian Clark. Rate, review, and subscribe to the Always Cheating podcast wherever you get your pods. Leave us a 5-star review, which is a free and easy thing to do that really helps the pod. Follow us wherever you get your social media. Visit our website, alwayscheating.com. And of course, check out this episode on YouTube. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to see our smiling faces and our sometimes good FPL teams, which is fun. I'm glad that we're on YouTube.
Yep.
Now fully. You can of course listen to the audio only version on YouTube, but now it's full video as well. Jump over to the live section of our YouTube channel to find these episodes more easily.
Great. All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week. Bye.